folks, so today we are all very pleased to bring to you the S24 Ultra's camera comparison going up against, of course, the one and only, the fabulous X100 Pro. Well, look, in all seriousness, I think this one's for the history books because there's so much to talk about, and I understand that the S24 Ultra has been getting a lot of flack for not bringing any major, huge hardware improvements, unlike many of the previous generations that we have had. Well, if you're one of those believers, trust me, you might just change your mind after this video. Hell, this video might even blow it. Okay, that sounds awful. Let's just get started. Goddamn. So as usual, I'm going to talk about the color modes, and we have the vivid color profile right here. The S24 only comes with what I could consider to be a vivid color profile. It doesn't really have any natural colors or any textured profile, so to speak. The X100 is really versatile if you think about it in that regard. But what I love, and I cannot get over, is these nice natural colors on the X100 Pro. There is nothing quite as good, quite as natural looking as what we get from the X100 Pros, with Zeiss natural colors, of course. The S24 again has nothing as such. Now you can use texture mode, which will jack up the contrast to high heaven, and yeah, most of the time it's going to look a little overexposed, a little crushed. It doesn't look horrible in this situation. It's very stylish, so to speak, but it's not exactly what I would want personally in a shot like this. But there are situations where it can be handy. We'll get to that. Now in this case, it's kind of a backlit shot, not completely, not horrendously, so to speak, but there are two things here. I really like the extra bit of detail and contrast we have in the shadows on the S24 Ultra, but the colors on the X100 Pro, damn. What did I just say? These Zeiss natural colors will produce some of the most realistic colors that you could ever hope or expect in any given situation almost. Now this one is kind of a backlit shot indoors. You can see the chandeliers in the background, and I do think that the X100 in general has a lower exposure. Now there are benefits and problems to that. Now I also understand I didn't really get the angle quite right, which is why the S24 with the OnePlus 12, yeah, I do have it, the camera comparison is coming, and the OnePlus's cameras are just catching more light at that angle. The X100, not quite happening because of my error. But the advantage on the X100 is that the highlights look very well controlled. Now close-ups, see, this is also kind of a backlit shot, but at this point I think we have established both phones are spectacular with backlit situation at the very least. But close-ups, well, the only thought that I have is, damn, the S24 is good. It's very good. Like, you can get real close with this stuff. Having said that, I did want more contrast, and we can get that on the X100 Pro. Now I'll tell you this much, I think it's again lowering the exposure a little too much. If it had just jacked up the contrast like it should, I think textured mode would have looked even better in this particular case. But at least, as I said, you have the option to try it out, you have the option to experiment. Now then, for the ultrawide camera, see, yeah, this is a weird ass angle that I took. I don't even know why I decided to take it like this, but anyways, it's done. The fact here is this, the X100 Pro, it has way more natural colors, and that's a given, but it also has significantly more contrast, which I personally prefer a lot more. Especially in this case, I think the S24 is good. It's very good for the ultrawide, but the higher contrast just gives it a whole different dimension on the X100, and I really like it. You might not, that's going to depend on personal preference. But one thing that I don't like on the S24 as well is that it's just artificially increasing the blue color in the sky. You can see that the gradient doesn't look very natural, while it obviously does on the X100. Now of course we have another slightly backlit sunset shot, and it's usually at a time like this, with just how warm the sunlight is, you can really see the difference in the color reproduction. The X100 Pro is so spot on. Damn, bloody hell, I cannot even. Anyways, let's just, consider that to be a given at this point. The X100 Pro's color reproduction is something else. It's on a different level. The S24 doesn't even come close. Even the white balance is kind of a little too cooled off on the S24 in this case. But again, the sky, it just looks a little too vibrant. It's not supposed to be like that. It's sunset time. You don't have almost any blue at that point in time. I did take an indoors ultrawide as well. Also backlit because, it's my comparison. And well, what I can surmise is that the S24 is now doing a better job with white balance, because indeed, the foreground was completely lit with a very warm light, warm chandelier, and the background we had completely white lights. And I think the S24's foreground looks a little bit better, a little bit more accurate. In case you're wondering, the detail preservation is basically identical on both. It's absolutely phenomenal on both, in these cases at least. But macros, this is where things get interesting. So With the ultrawide camera, the S24 is better. The X100 is incredible, but the S24 is probably one of the best when it comes to ultrawide macro. The reason I'm saying ultrawide macro is because the X100 is not limited to the ultrawide. We can also use the 4.3x telephoto for close-ups. Now, just using 4.3x, you can see it doesn't get nearly close enough. I mean, this is a massive difference, and it's pointless to use it at 4.3x. What you want to do is use 8.6x with sensor crop, and that is where things get interesting, because now you get a shot that is basically zero distortion because you're using telephoto, and you also get a lot more depth of field. It's not quite as apparent in this particular case, but the depth of field is seriously higher than any ultrawide macro mode could provide. Now then zoom. So this is the main camera shot, and once again, the higher texture on the X100 really looks nice in this case, but I do want to give the S24 a little bit credit. The color of the building, especially like the lighter shades of the building, it looks very realistic, and the slight warm tones that were coming from the sunlight, it's actually being reproduced a little bit better on the S24 in this case. Now then 2x sensor crop, on the X100 at least. The S24 doesn't use 2x sensor crop with photo mode. You can use it in portraits, but not in regular photos, which is an odd limitation. It's the same thing, just use the same thing, just don't blur the background, that's all there is to it. But of course, cropping in, and you can see the detail difference is there, definitely the X100 Pro, because it is using sensor crop properly. I do think it has more detail, it's a bit more sharpened as well, just a little pinch, not too much. But I do think the extra bit of detail just pulls the X100 ahead in this case. With the 3x, now see, this is where the S24 kicks in, because it has a 3x telephoto, and it's a very good and high quality telephoto, even though just 10 megapixels doesn't really say much about it. But as you can tell, the detail difference speaks for itself. The X100 is doing a fairly good job. I'm telling you, it has insanely good detail preservation in general, but of course, with regular photos at least, the S24 does pull ahead with the optical zoom that it has. Now for 5x or 4.3x, both of these are telephoto because the S24 actually bumped down from 10x to 5x, which I think is a good move, because 5x is the absolute maximum that I've ever really had to zoom in ever. And the fact that it also can kind of use sensor crop now at 10x. So the X100, I'm not exactly sure if it actually uses sensor crop to get to 10x or not, but I do believe the S24 does something similar. And I don't think there's much of a detail difference at the end of the day. I do think both of them have some small amounts of sharpening that I can tell. Like it's a very small difference, and I'm looking at it on a massive display, so I can kind of see the difference. You probably cannot on YouTube. But yeah, it's very similar, and that's a very good thing on both. At 30x, the approach kind of differs. I do think I prefer how the X100 looks in general, because the S24 looks like it's got some smoothing or maybe some noise reduction going on, which it's missing out on a lot of the textures. You can see on a few of the walls the textures are visible, while others don't really have it. So I think noise reduction is a little too strong. It doesn't need to be in this case. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Now then, high resolution. So high res is quite something on both. So the S24 has a 50 megapixel mode, which essentially bends down from the 200 megapixels, and I think that's the way to use it, personally speaking, because as you can tell, both of them are very similar in terms of details, but I don't know, something about the S24 looks very over-sharpened. There is over-sharpening and haloing on the X100 as well, but I don't think it's as much as the S24 Ultra. Now you can use 200 megapixels if that's something you fancy, and yes, it does have less over-sharpening and the detail level is pretty much identical to the X100 Pro, but that's the contention that I have. If I'm using a 200 megapixel sensor, at least have more detail than the 50 megapixels on the X100. All it has is slightly less over-sharpening, which is good, but not good enough, not in my books. Now then with the ultrawide, see, the X100 I think takes a much more balanced approach with the high res. It has 50 megapixels with its main camera, it has it with the ultrawide, it also has it with the telephoto, but the S24 still has a 200 megapixel sensor, which I have my concerns with that. One of them being that without high res, you don't really get the same level of detail. Now, it is producing a lot of detail, the S24 that is, and with 200 pixels, that is impressive, no question, but it is also ridiculously over-sharpened. I would expect nothing less. It doesn't have the resolution to keep up with that, right? The software is doing a lot in this case, needless to say. Now with 5x, see, both phones have 50 megapixels. It's technically 4.3x on the X100, yeah, I know, but still. I wanted to take this particular shot. I thought it would look so bloody incredible, but it just... The S24 did not focus. So of course I had to take a spare. Now this one, it's a simple shot 5x. It's basically the same on both. If I cannot tell any major difference between the two, I don't think there's any point in even thinking about it. Both of these are producing a ridiculous amount of detail with 50 megapixels, and that's why I wanted a 50 megapixel sensor at the very least on the ultrawide as well, because then it would be on par with the X100, at least in terms of the hardware. Now of course, selfies. See, the one thing that I immediately really like about the X100 is the much wider field of view. This is the widest the S24 can go, and you can see just how much farther away the X100 can get. I really like that, personally speaking. I think the S24 in this case at least is producing better skin tones. I think I'm looking maybe just a touch too red on the X100. But anyways, I did take a backlit shot as well because, you know, it's my comparison, a backlit selfie had to happen. And, well, the S24 kept taking a shot like this, which completely blows my mind. Why would it even take a shot like that? It just doesn't make any sense. I even wiped the lens, you know, made sure it was clean, no smudges, nothing. Same exact result. That's the final result you're looking at on the S24. The X100 is miles ahead. It's not even a competition at this point. And it's weird because when I took this indoors backlit selfie, yeah, I get it, it's not backlit by the sun, but still, it's backlit after all, and it's doing a tremendous job on both phones. It looks very similar. The S24 does have less detail and some small artifacts and grain that I can see. It's a minor difference, but I do think the X100 is still pulling ahead, but the difference is not as ridiculously massive as in the previous shot. And of course, portrait selfie. See, this is where I think the X100, it has a much more stylish approach, which I personally cannot get over. If I ever took portrait selfies, I usually don't, but if I do, it's gonna be with the X100, because just look at the background, look at the bokeh. I do think that the X100 is blowing some of the highlights, especially on my arm, a little bit more than the S24, but the S24 doesn't really have the field of view to get my arm in there, so there's that to consider. Now, a backlit portrait, see, this is again what just blew my mind. With a portrait selfie, somehow the S24 is doing a tremendous job. It's not as good with the dynamic range as the X100 Pro. There are very few phones that can compete with dynamic range on the X100 Pro, just so you know. The S24 is still doing a really nice job. It's, you know, making sure that there's good contrast on my face. So is the X100. And I do like the skin tones a little bit more on the X100 in this case as well. But it's not too far off, not as ridiculous as the backlit selfie that I took just a few moments ago. Now again, indoors backlit portrait as expected, and I think both are doing a tremendous job in this case. You see just how insane the dynamic range on the X100 is. It's not even considering that very bright warm chandelier in the background to be part of the highlights. It's pretty insane, to be entirely honest. Now for night selfies, the S24 takes it. Simple enough, because the S24's detail preservation, noise reduction, everything combined, it looks significantly better. Now I know the lighting is a little off, which is why I look like I haven't slept in 3 days, but you know, that's not really the case. I took this like a few moments ago. Now night selfie portrait. Oddly enough, the X100 Pro doesn't have a night selfie portrait, but it can somehow produce a better looking shot as opposed to the night mode selfie without using a long exposure. It's weird, but overall I still think the S24 pulls side, it's brighter, it's got way more detail. Now then for the portrait, see, this is where things get interesting. So both have tremendous quality, as anyone in their right mind would expect, but again, I really like the bokeh on the X100 Pro, personal preference here. Another thing that I really prefer on the X100 is that it's not going crazy with the skin tone. There was warm sunlight falling on me all over, and you can see how it's kind of looking a little oversaturated on the S24 Ultra, which I'm not a huge fan of. Now in this case, see, this is a 35mm shot on the X100 Pro. You get a lot of focal lengths on the X100, by the way. You don't have that many options on the S24, which is kind of a bummer. But anyways, I think the S24, again, very saturated skin tones. I mean, it is a little too saturated. I look like I'm made of chocolate right there. But on the X100 Pro, it's not saturating my skin tones as much, which I like, but it's also blowing out some small parts of my skin, like my arm, parts of my face, a little too much, which I don't like. So it's a bit contentious here. Now then, 50mm, which is basically 2x sensor crop, and yes, somehow now the S24 Ultra can use sensor crop. Yeah. I don't know why we can't use that with photo mode, but anyways, it's phenomenal on both, to be honest. The S24 takes a very safe approach. And that is something I'm pretty sure a lot of people will prefer, because when you're taking portraits, you want them to look as consistent as possible. But for me, the X100 Pro, with the higher contrast, more punchy look that it gives me, any day of the week I'll take it. It looks so much better to my eyes that I don't even need to consider the S24 here. Personal preference, again, I really want to drive that home here. Now then, 85mm, this is basically 3x on both phones. I guess 3.5x on the X100, far as I can tell. And see, it's weird as hell, but somehow the X100 Pro has basically just as much detail as the S24 Ultra. The S24 is using 3x optical. Now, overall, I again think that the S24 is a little oversaturated, but other than that, not many complaints, to be honest. Now, 100mm, which is 5x on both, or 4.3x on the X100, but you get the point. I think it's just the same thing that we saw with previous shots. The S24 looks a little too saturated, which I personally don't really like, given that there was warm sunlight, and the X100, I think it's a little overexposed in some of the parts of my face, which I again don't really like. I wish there was some form of middle ground between the two, which would be absolutely perfect, but that's not exactly what we're getting here. Now, backlit portrait, of course, backlit portrait is there, and I guess it's very close. I do like this slightly higher contrast on the X100 Pro as opposed to the S24, which looks a little too flat for my taste, as you would expect at this point. But yeah, otherwise not any massive difference between the two. Now, I did take a 2x backlit portrait, and yeah, I know the angle isn't quite right on both, which is why the S24 has more of the sun in the background, all that jazz. But still, I think both are doing a fairly good job. The S24, as usual, has just lower contrast in general. That's just the way it processes images. The X100, I do like the contrast, but if you look at the lower right-hand corner, it's messing up the background blur detection, essentially. The S24 is spot on, is perfect. Now for night portraits, this is where actually the X100 is taking a massive leap forward. I didn't expect the S24 to struggle this much. I know it was fairly low light, but just look at the X100 Pro, it's perfect. Now then, regular good old-fashioned night mode. So you probably know exactly why I took this shot. The night sky, baby. Oh yes. Now somehow, the S24 Ultra is doing a very good job with the night sky. Like it's bluish, sure, not quite as dark as I would personally like it, but it's way better than what the X100 Pro is producing. The white balance, you see there was some warm streetlights around the building, and there are some hints of that on the X100 Pro, but it's not overbearing. The S24, it's definitely going a little too overboard with that. But you know what just absolutely baffles me is that the phones, man, they're trolling me. They just switch places here. Now the X100 Pro has significantly better of a night sky. It's way darker, cleaner than the S24 Ultra, which is quite impressive. And it is also a little too warm. While the S24 Ultra is now nailing the white balance, but it's brightening the night sky a little too much. It's a similar story here. The white balance is pretty good on both in this case because there's white lights, obviously it's gonna be good. But yeah, I think if there are some highlights in the foreground or in the image of the X100 Pro, then maybe that's when it gives us darker, more high contrast with the night sky. Now the night mode close-ups. So we already established just how good close-ups can be on the S24, and you can see it right here. The S24 is perfectly focusing on that one flower in the foreground, which I really wanted both phones to focus on. The X100 is not doing that at all. Now the S24 is way too vibrant as well, like the leaves just look crazy, that's too much green. The X100 Pro is balancing that out a little bit better in my opinion. Now then, ultra low light. Of course, I've got some beautiful juicy ultra low light shots, and yeah, the S24 is struggling, damn. I took like 5 or 6 shots on both phones just to be completely sure about the consistency. And the S24 continued to screw up in each and every one. There's so much artifacting and just a sheer lack of detail. Let me zoom in and show you. This is a 500% crop, and just bloody hell, look at the X100 Pro's detail preservation and noise reduction. Damn, that thing is something else. But the S24, you can see just how much worse it looks in comparison at least. Now, the first time when I saw the S24 specs, yeah, this is what was going on in my mind. Blimey, no ultrawide upgrade, eh? What's going on? Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm gonna keep that, but anyways. Look, the ultrawide situation is this. The S24 Ultra has no ultrawide upgrades, but somehow the software, I don't know if it's AI or not, but I do understand that the software has gotten insanely good, like damn. I mean, look at it, the only thing that the X100 is doing way better, and it does this better than most others, is conserving the highlights and the lens flares. Now of course, if you take an ultrawide shot in a very low light situation like this one, then yeah, the S24 is gonna struggle. The hardware cannot keep up with this. Bloody hell, I'm paying so much damn money for this phone. Why is the ultrawide camera, not a high quality one. The sensor, that is, why is it not a high quality one like we have on the X100 Pro? You can clearly see the difference. But this is where the hardware is really allowing the X100 to pull ahead. As long as you have at least some amount of reasonable light, even with low light situations, you can get a really nice shot. Now, the X100 still by far has some of the best balance and contrast when it comes to ultra-wide night mode. So it's hard to beat, needless to say. Even the night sky looks comparable on both. It's actually a little bit dark on the S24, which I do like. Now then, zooming at night. See, this is an interesting situation. So here we have 2x, and you do get a straight up 2x sensor crop option on the X100 Pro. You don't really do that on the S24 Ultra, as you would expect. But guess what I found when I zoomed all the way in? 500% crop, and somehow the S24 has way more detail. And this was not the case with regular main camera shots, just to be clear. I checked those were the exact same on both. Somehow, I think the X100 screwed up, maybe that's the case. It did focus, but I don't know, the detail preservation looks like miles ahead on the S24 Ultra, which it should not be. At 3x, needless to say, the S24 is gonna pull ahead. It has way better detail preservation, but I do prefer the slightly higher contrast that we're getting once again on the X100 Pro. Now then, 5x. So this is a very difficult shot, needless to say. I do think that in general the X100 is doing a better job with handling the highlights and giving us more detail in some of the shadows, like the brickwork right there. I do see more detail as opposed to the S24 Ultra. But then 10x, Jesus, the S24 went crazy. So I got one shot like this, which is full of noise and artifacting. I don't know why that happened. And then we had this one, which had so much noise reduction that you have no details whatsoever, just none. And then I got one that also had the lights turned off. So yeah, needless to say, at least in this situation, the X100 Pro, by the way, produced like 5 identical looking shots, which was so impressive. But yeah, it's a very difficult shot, so I guess the S24 just couldn't hack it. I did take a regular 10x shot as well, which didn't have any ridiculous lights in the foreground. But anyways, I think the X100 again is doing a slightly better job. It is a little oversaturated, I guess, but the detail preservation, the noise reduction, the slightly darker night sky, it's overall doing a slightly better job as opposed to the S24 with this 10x shot. And so that's a wrap for this comparison, man. All of these are just getting so much longer and longer. It's just, there's so many modes to take care of, just anyways. So here's my thing. I still like the X100 Pro more than the S24 Ultra. A lot of things are based on personal preference. I like Zeiss natural colors way more than anything the S24 Ultra can provide. I prefer the portrait mode, I prefer the selfie portraits and stuff like that. I do indeed think the night mode is better on the X100 as opposed to the S24 Ultra, in most cases at least. I think it's a win for the X100 Pro here, but the S24 Ultra, it's gotten significantly better as compared to the S23 Ultra. I can tell you that much right now. It's just leaps and bounds ahead of what the S23 could produce. And it's all thanks to software. This is why I said even without hardware upgrades, the software on the S24 is taken a massive leap forward, and it's taken the cameras with it, and that's a very important aspect that everyone needs to understand. Let's not hate the S24 for not having hardware upgrades. Let's hate it for not giving us a good ultra-wide camera. Simple as that. So anyways, I'll be seeing you guys soon enough with many more to come. Cheers!